Hello, this video is going to cover how to aim with the ambi using prediction and crosshair placement for the most part. Some parts of this video assume you watched the room tutorials, but it's not required. Enjoy. Ghosting. When you're aiming, you should be aiming where the enemy will be and not react to where you think they are to account for reaction time. If you have reaction time of 200 milliseconds and you shot when you reacted to the enemy being on your crosshair, then you shot where the enemy was 200 milliseconds in the past. So, you miss if they're moving across your screen. To account for this, you will have to react and shoot to where the enemy will be. You're essentially aiming for a ghost of where the enemy will be and not the player himself. You can use video editing software to see the ghost, but make sure you're not moving your mouse in the clip so you can see it properly. You want to duplicate the clip, but one clip is ahead of another and is 30% or less in transparency, so you know which clip is which. If you're using 30 FPS, then one frame is 33 milliseconds. If you're using 60 FPS, then one frame is 17 milliseconds. Figure out your reaction time and move the transparent clip accordingly. If the enemy is moving very fast, then the ghost will be further ahead of the player. If the enemy is moving slowly, then the ghost will be closer to the player. If the enemy is switching strafes, then the ghost is going to be opposite of where the enemy is going before or right as they switch strafes. You'll have to aim at a ghost when you're moving as well, but I'll cover that later in the video for the sake of simplicity at the start of the video. For now, just stay still for a brief amount of time before shooting so you don't have to account for it. Aiming above the body. This is probably common advice you hear for headshots, but I'm going to add it here anyways in case you haven't heard of it. Basically, you focus on aiming at the center of the enemy's body above their torso to hit your headshots. This way you don't have to focus on watching the movement of the enemy's head and get tunnel vision, but you focus on the entire player model instead. Map geometry and textures. When you're trying to predict the trajectory of the enemy's head, you can use map geometry and textures to see where you should place your crosshair. The enemy likes to move in two directions, usually because they don't want to bump into walls or they see an entrance or whatever. So they walk in a grid basically. We can use this to place our crosshair accordingly so we can aim at those trajectories or when the enemy is walking up a hill or stairs. If the enemy is walking up a hill or stairs or whatever, their trajectory might not seem how their surroundings would show it to be. It can change slightly because of the enemy's collision hole, so you should keep this in mind from time to time. If you know where the enemy's head level is and you know the trajectory of where they're going, then you can land shots after someone lands from a jump, head level. In TF2, enemies can have different heights, so you might need to aim higher if it's a heavy or lower if it's a scout. Nonetheless, it's useful to know how to aim at head level when playing. You can see if you're aiming at head level by looking at the vertical lines around the map like corners. If those vertical lines are perfectly parallel, then you're aiming at head level. If those lines bend to a point upwards, then you're looking too high. If those lines bend to a point downwards, then you're looking too low, aiming around corners. When you're waiting for an enemy to leave a corner, you should aim at head level away from the corner to account for reaction time. So, when they leave the corner, you will react to it and then you can just time your shot to their ghost. Enemy movement. When it comes to enemy movement, I usually like to try to headshot someone right after they switch their strafes or movement. Most of the time the enemy isn't going to change their movement again for some time, especially in pubs, so you will be able to react to that in time and shoot them. Sometimes if the enemy is good, they know you're doing this and will fake you out by switching their movement, then switch their movement again afterwards to throw you off. So, keep this in mind. There are also movement patterns the enemy has, which I covered in my rhythm videos, that might help you predict where the enemy's head is going to be, but I won't get into it here. You can also change the enemy's movement patterns with bait, like turning 180 then turning back again to make them go after you and headshot them. Or you can go around the corner and make them either go around the corner or after the corner if they're further away from it to get a predictable movement pattern to headshot. You can also pretend to go for trick stabs to make them move predictably then headshot them afterwards. If the enemy is moving faster than that rhythm to where they can't react to their own movement on the fly, then their movement has a pattern to it that won't react to your movement. So you can predict it and counter it. If someone is changing strafes really fast, then you should try to go to their side to get a headshot on them. If you're really masochistic, then you should try to catch their ghost with your eyes, then your mouse. Headshot cooldown. I heard of a good trick for shooting at the end of the headshot cooldown that I learned from a stabby video. If you have auto reload on, which you should, on second click of the reload sound you can headshot on the ambi. So you can keep this in mind when you want to know when the headshot cooldown on your ambi has ended. Head heights. In this section I'll be showing you how tall player models are and how short or how high the head is when they jump or crouch. When the enemy crouches, their head is a head and a half or 2 heads below where their head is when they're standing. If the enemy is jumping, then their head is 2 player models tall minus 1 or 2 heads. One more thing is that disguised spies have the same headshot hitbox as if they weren't disguised. So keep that in mind. Cheetahs has a video on it. Mouse movement. With mouse movement, I recommend having low sense on the ambassador for easier aim. There are people out there who are great with high sense, but you're probably not one of them if you're watching this video. So, I recommend using a script which makes your knife sense high for trick stabs and movement, while the sense on your ambassador is low. You might be saying that this ruins muscle memory, but if you're a spy main who mainly uses knife, then you cannot hit your shots anyways, so it's no big loss to you anyways, so don't worry. When it comes to mouse movement, when you're starting out with headshots on the MB, you want to keep your mouse still and time your shots. The more you do this and get used to this, you will naturally flick your mouse to reposition your crosshair quickly to where the enemy's head will be. You can also overtrack the enemy if your crosshair is behind where the enemy is going, so their head is on your crosshair for a longer period of time. If your crosshair is ahead of where the enemy is going, then you should try to undertrack the enemy so your crosshair is also on their head for a longer period of time. You do this so the time you have to click your mouse for a headshot is more generous and forgiving. Ideally, you would be tracking the enemy perfectly, but if you cannot do this, then use overtracking and undertracking. Sometimes, when you're moving your mouse a lot, you might have a hard time seeing things clearly, especially if you have a 60Hz monitor. So, you can try to keep your mouse still before you flick your mouse. This trick helps you see things more clearly compared to constantly moving your mouse around all the time. I learned this trick by watching Cheetahs. When you're looking near head level, then you can track straight lines on your screen by moving your mouse straight. But when you're looking up or down and you try to track a straight line, you'll notice that you'll have to curve your mouse to properly track it. Your sensitivity is the same all around, just that you have to curve your mouse now. The way you see the game and the way your mouse sees the game is different. This is how your mouse sees the game. If you move your mouse left or right with your cursor on this image, that's how you would move your mouse in game. And as you see, the lines that are supposed to be straight in game on this image are distorted and curved when put in this type of perspective at the bottom and the top of the image. So, keep this in mind when you're aiming up or down and trying to aim, ghosting and your movement. Now, beyond this point of the video, things are going to get a lot more technical and abstract, so beware. When you're moving, you're gonna have to account for reaction time and aim at a ghost of where the enemy will be on your screen as well. If you and the enemy are moving, then you're gonna have to add the ghost of the enemy from your movement to the ghost of the enemy's movement. Let's say hypothetically when you're moving to the left, the enemy's ghost is going to be to the right of the enemy by 3 player models because you're a scout. Let's say they're moving to your left and their ghost is ahead of the enemy by 2 player models to the left. When you add the 2 ghosts together, then the ghost will be to the right of the enemy by 1 player model if you account for the enemy's movement and your own. Obviously, this is going to be a nightmare to keep track of when playing, so I have an analogy to understand how the enemy's ghost moves when you're moving. Let's say you're in a body of water. If you go left, the water will flow from the left to the right of your screen. If you go right, the water will flow from the right to the left of your screen. If you go forwards, then the water will flow from your crosshair to the edges of your screen. If you go backwards, the water will flow from the edges of your screen to your crosshair. If you go diagonally to the right and forwards, then water will flow away from a point on the right edge of your screen in the middle. If you're going forwards in some way, then there's a point on or off your screen that the water flows away from. If you're going backwards in some way, then there's a point where the water flows to, a point on or off your screen. This analogy will help you see the enemy's ghost from your own movement. Then you can add that to the ghost of the enemy's movement. Anyways, I hope this video was useful to you for your ambi aim, and have a good day.